my baby, and I like new silky sheets every night. He buys me fur and whiskey neat and keeps on coming every week. Ooh, he wants the suburbs where school's out for summer, and we live by his mother. I keep my drugs in the cupboard 'cause I'm only sweet when I'm high. 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 In class, I learned a lot. Two pretty boys to pass the time. 'Cause I got that good shit, American pride. Kiss the kids goodnight and take the Harley for a ride. Ooh, he wants the suburbs where school's up for summer,
Testing, testing, testing.
and we live by his mother. I keep my drugs in the cupboard 'cause I'm only sweet when I'm high. 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 I get so bored, scrub the floors, then get drunk while doing chores. Does he even know me? Ooh, I'm never sure when he'll be home. Get into trouble on my own. I don't get lonely. Ooh, he wants the suburbs where school's out for summer, and we live by his mother. I keep my drugs in the cupboard 'cause I'm only sweet when I'm high. I'm only sweet when I'm high. I'm only sweet when I'm high. I'm forever. There's no place for time when you're young. Can't find the words, but we know how we feel. Could we stay longer here in the summer? In the summer. I hope the summer never ends. Oh no. In the summer. I hope the summer never ends. Summer never ends. Oh no. And the days go and the nights go. Watch the waves as they ride into the shoreline. Feel the breeze as it clears your mind. Breathe in this moment and don't close your eyes. Can we stay longer here in the summer? I hope the summer never ends. Oh no. In the summer. I hope the summer never ends. Summer never ends. Oh no. And the days go and the nights go. Watch the waves as they ride into the shoreline. Feel the breeze as it clears your mind. Breathe in this moment and don't close your eyes. Could we stay longer here in the summer? In the summer. I hope the summer never ends. Oh no. In the summer. I hope the summer never ends. Summer never ends. Oh no. And the days go and the nights go. And the days go and the nights go. I'm running away from the past I left behind. I'm looking for answers, but I'm blinded by the light. I'm lost in the music, can I stay here for the night? I promise I'll be gone in the morning, out of sight and out of mind. Snowblind. are standing still. It's like you're stuck in a nightmare, but you keep doing it for the thrill. Well, this is reality, you only live it once, so wake up from your dream. But just for tonight, let the lines get blurred, let your thoughts be free, let your thoughts be free.
Alright, it's Mark, and it's time to start our live show. And so tonight's sponsor are the Armabender armature kits from Tetsu in Japan. And of course, we talked about these in the past. They are made from brass and aluminum and phosphor bronze, and they're actually some of the best kits you can buy, actually, in terms of the smoothness of motion and just the accuracy of all the machine parts, and also for strength. So check it out at stopmotionstore.com. Now let me get rid of this, and let's see here. So I just want to remind everybody that we do have a 5-week challenge going on right now. It's a stop motion challenge, and so if you're interested, go to our site and go to the top page, at the top of the page, and it says, well, I can't really zoom in here, but it says like 5-week challenge rules. Click on that, and I think the topic is what? It's outdoor sports and hobbies. And my cat is eating my plastic here. Get out of here. Alright. So anyway, check out the 5-week challenges. If you guys want to enter, that would be awesome. I know Zakira, I haven't seen Zakira posting anything for a while. I wonder if she's going to enter this time. But anyways, let's get rid of this. Also, some good news is that we have now broken through 6,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. So thank you guys for signing up and joining up and whatever else, liking and commenting and sharing and all that good stuff. All right. So anyways, so tonight we're going to continue working on this character. And welcome everybody. So, I know in the chat... okay. So, yeah, if you guys are looking for really cheap software for stop motion, Heron Animation, I think it's called, is the software. It's free. We've actually used it on the show to do some testing with our replacement faces, and it works pretty good. It's a little bit buggy, you know, but it's free, so... like, I wouldn't use it for any serious productions, but... Alright, so anyways, where are we? So before this show, I've been trying to clean up my desk a bit. Things have gotten pretty messy and dirty, and my pasta roller machine, which I use to roll clay through to change colors, or to mix up colors, was really, really, really dirty. So if you guys use tools and they get really dirty and they've got clay and all kinds of icky stuff, I just use 91% isopropyl alcohol, and I put it on like a paper towel and just go over everything, and it works really good for most stuff. And it's just kind of good to kind of like disinfect your area and everything too, like if there's like if you spill something. And well, I don't know if really disinfecting is needed, but it's an added bonus, I guess. So anyways, I had some rubber gloves, and I have a cup, and I had some scissors. You can see, maybe, if my camera will focus. So these scissors are pretty messed up because I've been using them for making other molds, and I haven't cleaned them. You can also see here our scale is really nasty. This is actually pretty old, and I use it for mixing resin and silicone and all kinds of things. So I want to keep my hands clean, though, obviously. That's important. So my wife works in a hospital and gets boxes of these things, can get them for free. I don't know if that's really legal, but anyways. Never mind. So anyways, so we're going to mix up some silicone. We've got some Rebound 25. Same stuff we've been using for the past forever. And so the goal here tonight is just to to fill up this mold that we made. Now, I'm just going to kind of recheck, make sure that there's no cracks where any silicone can escape. Just kind of looking at it here, and it looks okay. So these are the two faces we sculpted of this guy here. And if you guys haven't seen the previous show, you should watch it. It's actually pretty important to make sure that you prep everything for your character's mold properly, because you don't want to waste silicone. I just bought some more of this silicone for one of my client projects, making a mold of a head, and it came to like $48 for, you know, this. The volume is like what? How much? How much is in one of these? I mean, it's, well, okay, this is net weight 1 pound, so I don't know if this is full, if this is half a pound and this is half a pound and it makes 1 pound or what, but you know, it's pretty expensive. You don't want to waste it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use this. This is actually a chopstick. It's a metal one. Believe it or not, they make metal ones. If you go to a restaurant, of course they have bamboo, you know, and you get it in a little paper wrapper. And I was actually using, do I have one here? I might have one. I think this one, well, this is one, but I chopped it up. And this is a skewer for like shish kebab. You go to the, let's say, grocery store or any place that sells, you know, meats and things. And you can buy these in a large pack, usually 50 of them for about $1. So they're really good. And they're actually great for pretty much multi-purpose mixing of paints and stuff like that, and small bottles or whatever. You can throw them away because they don't cost anything. But I decided that, you know, my wife was like, hey, well, we have some metal ones. Why don't you just use a metal one? So I've been using this one here because it's, you know, it's, well, it's reusable and it's strong and it's easy to clean, you know. So it landed in my box of sculpting tools. So we're going to use that to take out the silicone from our container, which you can see here. Are you guys are able to see everything? Chat not show on video. You might want to refresh your page, Janet. Anyways, I hope it works for you guys. It's not good if it doesn't work. But I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to put it in this this cup, and I'm going to just guess as to how much I need. It's not a lot. It's very little that I'm going to need here. It's a bit hard to do with the camera. I'll work my way around it. I'm going to put in about 0.2 ounces of the part, this is B. Yeah, this is part B. So 0.2 ounces. And I'm just going to scrape the rest back into the container from my steel chopstick and cover it up. Now this might not be enough when I put part A in there. I think it will be. So you can see how little I've put in the cup. It's like almost nothing. But I would rather use just a little bit less than what I need for this, and then mix up more if I need to. Then to, you know, like I say, you don't want to waste it. You don't want to put in, like, you know, a whole half container of silicone for something small. So 0.3. Alright, there we go. So 0.4. Actually, I'm going to put in just a little bit more of a blob because I think that my scale is off just a tad bit. Because if I eyeball it, I notice sometimes that it seems like it, like when it's 0.2 ounces, it was probably just barely over that, in between 0.2 and 0.3. So if I notice that the scale kind of shows that it went up really faster than it should have, I usually add just a teeny little bit more. So now I'm in between 0.4 and 0.5. Okay, so I'm going to mix it up. Okay, glad you guys can see. That's good. A Star Wars chopstick. I haven't seen that. Alright, so I don't know if this is going to be enough. I am going to just stir this up. And as I mentioned, previously when you guys have seen me mix up silicone, you use a clear plastic cup because you can see underneath where the two colors aren't mixed up well. A lot of times, if you miss a spot at the bottom part of the cup and then you pour this in your mold, what ends up happening is you'll get like a soft spot in your mold that doesn't really cure properly, or it becomes kind of like sticky, and if you try to cast something in it, it leaves a little bit of a weird texture. So what I use the scissors for is I gotta cut this cup down towards the base. And I'll cut around the cup like this. Now I have a very short, stubby cup. I'll throw that in the garbage. And the reason why is because if I were to try to pour this out of a long cup, like I had before, most of the silicone would just get stuck on the sides. And I don't want that, so. Alright, so I can see this is probably not enough, but I'm going to pour it in anyway. So I'm going to kind of just go over these details with the light coating of the silicone, like the eyeballs and the mouth. And that should hopefully allow the silicone to get in those spots, to kind of flow in there without capturing air bubbles. So I can do that over the whole surface if I want to, or I could pour it in on the side. There's a lot of ways to do this, but this silicone takes about maybe 30 or so minutes to set up, maybe a little bit longer, and it allows the air to escape. So as you can see here, you'll see these air bubbles that kind of popped up. There's like one right here, so I can pop. Here's one where the eyeball is, the eyeball detail. So when I first put the silicone on here, I'll just kind of look for those air bubbles to come to the surface, and I'll just try and pop them. And I'm not pressing hard on the clay. I'm trying to avoid obviously doing that because I don't want to texture it or dent it. So from here, I'm just going to kind of go over the whole thing, and I think we should be good. I can probably just pour the rest in here, but I'm going to give it a little bit of time for that air to come to the surface. And then I'm going to pop those bubbles. The main thing you don't want is to have the air bubbles like stuck to the surface of your clay, like that one. I don't know if you guys saw, well, you probably can't because I'm not zoomed in, but there was one bubble that was kind of on the surface of the clay, and sometimes those get stuck on the surface. They don't actually rise up. So you can see how I kind of just coated it really thin like this, maybe. Can you see? There we go. And you gotta kind of think in slow motion because silicone really takes a long time to get into cracks and to settle into things. But if you had a time-lapse camera on this, you would see how it kind of slowly seeps into all the little parts and spreads out, and kind of like if you can imagine a candle when you melt the wax, how it just kind of droops and everything. Same thing happens with this. Right. So I did mix up too little of this silicone, and we're going to try and calculate the next one based on the last one when I measured up. So I made up in total 0.4 ounces. And if this is about halfway full at 0.4 ounces, I can just do a quick calculation, and if I want it to be filled to the top of the sculpted faces, it would be about another 0.4 ounces. And then to give it a little bit of thickness on top, I'll need like maybe 0.6 ounces or so. If you want it to be safe, we could do it 0.8. So I'll probably mix up 0.4 ounces and 0.4 ounces of the A and B, and I think we'll be good. Like I say, that's, if you're wanting to be safe, that is the best way to do it, is just mix up a little bit less than you need. I'm going to use this scraper, scrape this on the side, and it will just settle down into the mold by itself. I do see an air bubble, so I'm going to pop it. There we go. So yeah, it's pretty cool that we've got 6,000 subscribers now. I mean, it's taken a long time. And our channel is not the most popular channel on the planet, but it's pretty cool that some people are still devoted to stop motion out there. Even though it's a tedious thing to do, So I am going to grab another plastic cup off to the side here. I'll be right back. Alright. Like I said, 0.4 ounces and 0.4 ounces be 0.8. And I think that should fill this mold, but not too much. See another air bubble here. I'm going to pop it. There we go. That might be in the mouth of this character. Another little air bubble here. I know that some people say you can use rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle, kind of like this, to spray on top of a mold to pop the bubbles, but I'm always kind of afraid that might mess up the curing of the silicone. So I don't really like to do that kind of stuff, but so Whiskey says she said that the live feed chat is not showing on screen. It is only on the YouTube webpage. So if you are full screen, you will not see the chat. Ah, okay. I understand now. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. YouTube keeps changing everything, and I'm not sure what's best. Okay, turn my scale on again. So what do you guys prefer, having the chat the way I had it before, or do you like the new system? And I wonder if they'll actually have that new system for your phone and whatnot, a new chat system. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just getting the silicone to drip towards the bottom edge of the cup here. So 0.4 and 0.4 is what we decided on. So let's see if I can do that. 0.2 and 0.3, 0.4. Okay. So I can tell you guys a strange story. So my wife and I were up at about 2 in the morning to take her to the airport. Her father passed away in the Philippines, so she's on a flight there now, and so we're in the airport, and so my grandmother passed away when I was about maybe, I'm gonna say 16 years old or so, 15 or 16. And in the airport, I saw this woman, and she looked like a clone of my grandmother from when I was a kid. My grandmother passed away, a long time ago, but of course I never forgot her. I thought it was so weird to see somebody else that looked exactly like her. Like if you hadn't known she passed away, it was like, oh, that's my grandmother right there. Really freaky. Now my scale is saying I have 0. What's wrong with my scale here? Alright, well, I don't know if I have 0.4 or 0.3. Well, I'm going to put in let's see what this does first. Yeah, okay. 0.4. I think I'll put in just a little bit over 7, because I think it's a little bit under 6. Or, yeah, 0.7. A little bit over 0.7. What am I saying? Right there. Okay. So anyways, I didn't approach her or anything. I wasn't gonna be like, "Hey, you look like my grandmother. Can I talk to you?" She would probably think I was nuts. But I wonder how many people are out there that look similar to me or to any of you guys watching. I know they call them doppelgangers because some people look so similar, but that's the first time I had ever seen a doppelganger before. At least within my own family. Yeah, I think everybody does have a clone out there. Yeah, it's just so weird to see it. It's like, you don't really realize that you miss somebody until you see them again, even though you're not really seeing them, if that makes sense. It's like, oh. It's like your impulse is to go over and give them a hug, like, oh, I missed you. Anyways, so yeah, I took my wife to the airport, and so she's actually going to Hong Kong right now. She's about a third of the way through her flight. She left, she went from where we live to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong to Manila. So she has her total flying hours, or layover and flying hours from one destination to the next, is I think like 22 plus hours. Yeah, thanks, Penn. Well, he was getting up there in age. I think he was like over 80 years, a little bit over 80 years old. And I mean, I visited them many times, and my yeah, he was always into like politics. He would always ask about politics here in America. You know, that was like his big thing. Always interested in, you know, senators and uh, the president and all this other stuff and any of the controversies in the news, you know. But the past like 6 months, whenever we would see them on Skype, you know, my wife would give me the phone, her phone with her father on there, you know, to talk. And he just kind of was like despondent, I think is the word, where like he wasn't really with it mentally, I guess. And I could tell that he was not doing well. And it turns out that he has COPD, or had COPD, and couldn't really breathe well, and that's what he ended up passing from, which is sad. And you know, it's a different culture. I can't say that I was not close to him or anything like that, so I'm not really like distraught or anything. My wife was, though, so of course I feel really bad for her. And you know, they could kind of see it coming because they of his health condition, just it was deteriorating and stuff. But he was a pretty interesting person. Alright, so I'm going to just blob this in here, if that's a... Is that a mold making term? Just blob it in there? Is it accurate? I'm blobbing it into the mold cavity, yes. So I think this is definitely good here. I think that our guesstimate will work. I'm not worried about these air bubbles that are in there now. I don't have to really pop them or anything. I'll just let it be. Anytime you make a mold of a character, or maybe props or anything, like if you're making little miniature guns or like telephones or something you had to just make a lot of, depending on the film you're making, as long as the surface doesn't have any air bubbles, you can pour silicone on top of silicone, or do what you need to, and not have to worry about what happens with air catching and undercuts. I mean, you have to worry to a degree. If there's a really massive undercut, you want to be careful with that. But if you need to like pour a large character mold of some sort, like a large, like we're doing a 2.5D sculpted head, so everything's kind of flat. But if you're making a full 3D head and you want to make a mold of it, and then cut it open with the razor, what you can do is you can use this particular, like I said, this is Smooth On Rebound 25 is what we're using, and it's a brush on silicone, which means you can brush it into stuff, and like for example on my tool here, it's not really dripping off so much, right? It's kind of like very thick honey of some sort. And so you can paint this onto your character and then use another kind of silicone and pour it around that, and not have to worry about air bubbles touching the surface of your sculpted head. So let's see, Penn says, I have a question about mold making. If you wanted to make silicone hands, would you make the mold out of silicone or use polyurethane resin? Well, it depends on what you're casting into it. So if you want to make a hand and you want to cast the hand in silicone, you would use you can use resin, you can use like Ultra Cal 30, you can use plaster of Paris, any hard material. So that would work. And then if you're wanting to make hands and cast them in clay that you've melted. So I've made a lot of hands for, if you look on my YouTube channel on the Zombie Pirate Tales short film, the hands were all cast in clay so that I could sculpt them and manipulate them really easily. Clay is not the greatest thing to use for hands, but the reason that it's good in some cases is that you can sculpt the hand, and like if you make a fist or something, you can sculpt the hand with round features, and then when you make a fist, you see that my hand is kind of like at a 90 degree angle here. So sculpting that in clay and then being able to do that gives your hand a more realistic look to it. So you can have a real knuckle looking fist, for some parts of your animation, and then you can have it more rounded. It's kind of complicated to talk about. The hands have replacement parts, like these little brass square pieces that fit into the wrist, and so you could make different hands like that. And Will Vinton Studios used to use that technique a lot, and that's why I like to go with clay. But if you're going to do that, you want to use something like this kind of silicone. So you would, make the hand. You might want to put let's see. Well, you'd want to separate the top half from the bottom half. So you put a clay wall that goes all the way around the fingers, and it only goes up halfway, and then you put your silicone on top of that, and then remove that wall, flip the hand over, apply Vaseline as a mold release very sparingly around the mold, or like Free Coat 77, I think it's called. It's like a spray-on mold release, and then you spray it on there, and then you can pour silicone right on top of that. The air bubbles would rise up just like we're doing with this one, so both halves you would be upright. My glove just farted. Well, anyways, that's pretty much the general way you do it, and I should probably make a video of how to do that actually, because it is a pretty common question, and visually it's easier to show it as I'm doing it, because I'm better at doing that than actually explaining it. But alright, well anyways, this mold now will take, like I say, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes to set up. So next week what I'll do is I will pop this out before the show, and I will cast some heads. But right now this just has to sit somewhere quiet. I'm going to set it aside. And I'm going to take these gloves off, and these gloves are not really too messed up. What I like to do is I like to reuse these, and so I'll sort of take them off like this. And I'm going to set them aside on the floor because I'm making another mold besides this mold for a client. So what I do is I'll take the gloves off, and I'll put the left one on the left side, and have the part that had the silicone on it facing up, and I'll do the same with the other one. Take this glove off and put it on the right side, and then when I put these back on, I know which hand is which. Let's do this. Okay, so we got the heads going. They're molded, so we need to sculpt perhaps the body here. So we might do that next. Got some hot glue on here, so let me take that off. And I've got a lot of clay. This one looks like about the right color that I need, just about. Let me see. These are colors that I mixed up before for other stuff. So when you mix up clay, I've got this all in it's on a large piece of flat styrofoam, and then I put a plastic bag over it so the dust doesn't get in there, but still, there's still dust particles and everything. So it does get kind of dirty, unfortunately. But see those colors, because look, this is actually, I would say that's really close to what we need. So I'm going to use some of this. And so I've got some white clay, but I do want to make this clay a bit darker. Let's see if I have some. Let's see, some light gray. Ah, here we go. Alright, so I've got some Sargent Art clay. This is what I used to sell this on our website. It's actually a great clay. I haven't had any problems with this clay yet. Unlike some other clays that I have had problems with. So I'm going to take some of this gray and some white, and I'm going to make up a little bit of a more neutral, muted white color. It's not going to really be gray, but it's going to be less noticeably bright under certain lighting conditions. Oof. All right. Yeah, you know, I do not recommend that Craft Smart clay. So I know that some people out there have probably seen Craft Smart clay. It is not good clay. I found out the hard way that it really dries out and becomes brittle and hard after a while. And that's pretty unacceptable for oil-based clay. I don't understand. I mean, I guess for kids, you know, it's kind of a good thing because, you know, you can just leave a sculpture out and it becomes hard and maybe it would preserve it. But if you want to use the clay over and over, Craft Smart clay is not the clay to buy. So the Van Dyken clay tune is one kind that works great. Sargent Art works really good. The New Plast clay that's out there is pretty good. In the UK mainly. Jovi clay, which is more in Spain, is actually a good clay. I think it was, let me see here, Tamarami? Is it Tamarami that used that kind of clay? Let me move my microphone here for a sec. Alright, so I'm rolling this through my pasta machine. So I can have a more even color. So you can see it's not too drastic of a color difference that's coming out of here, but it's not so washed out in the light. So you can make out details. That's really the main reason you want to do this with clay, or even if you're just like painting a puppet, like if it's foam latex and you're painting it white, like a white shirt, you want to be able to see the details in the shirt, so you want to mute the colors a bit. As good as digital cameras are, they're still not perfect. And it's not going to pick up the same detail as your eyes. So just having a little bit of variance in the color does make a big difference. So, alright. I'm not going to be too picky about this, matching this color. I think this will work. So I'm going to make a ball. Yeah, of course you can draw on clay. I mean, you could just use any kind of tool. You know, any tool like this here. And you can, you know, do what you need, right? It's pretty easy. That's the cool part about clay. You know, any kind of tool like this, you can draw in there. You can you know, add textures. You can smooth it. Really anything. And I know that sounds really obvious to most people. But when I was a little kid, when I was in, I guess, kindergarten or first grade, the first time I ever saw somebody sculpt anything, I was amazed that you can take clay and well, what the person, her name was Miss George. She was the art teacher. And so Miss George, what she did was she had like a ball of yellow clay, and she just took it and like pinched out some legs, pinched out a little head and a little tail, and made a dog, you know. And I was just blown away that you could do that. I was like, what kind of, crazy magic is that? So, yeah, it's pretty amazing what you can do with clay. You can really do anything with it. And the important part, like I always say, when you're working with clay and you're doing this, it's not, it's more for the having fun doing it. And if you can enjoy sitting and creating something and seeing what happens, working with tools and just to see like, oh, what happens if I use a texture pad, for example? Like texture pads, you can press into the clay. I don't think I have any here on my desk, do I? Oh, I do. Yeah. So this is just a piece of silicone rubber that somebody poured into a small mold with texture in it. So I could take this and press it into the clay and transfer that texture into the clay, and get some cool designs, or like a cloth pattern if I wanted to. So if I wanted this guy to have a sweater, for example, I could definitely do that. You could pour silicone that's kind of firm, firm enough to be able to press into your clay. And you can take it and you can pour it on things like bark. One of the more popular things I've seen is you get some oranges, and you find one with a really heavy, pory kind of texture, with lots of pores, lots of holes. And you take some silicone, you put it on there, and you layer it up. And then wait until it's about, quarter inch thick or so, like this. And you can press it into a face and get a human skin pore texture, like that. Let's see here, see if this will work here without making this messy. It works. Yeah, you can use a Sharpie on here. You can even paint the clay. Wolverton Productions used to do that a lot. They would take acrylic paints, and sometimes you can use enamels. Like if you want to have, like if this guy had like a metallic brass belt buckle, you can use, of course, acrylics. They do have like a glossy brass kind of acrylic paint, which is water based. You can use that. You can use the enamels. I prefer to use acrylics, but alright, so here's this guy's body. Let's see, and so he's got some blue pants, which I can, let me see, I've got, this is actually really close as well in color. So I'm going to use this blue color to make some legs. So by the way, there's just some mineral oil in here. As I always say, there's mineral oil. This is just paper towels. And that is for smoothing the clay, for anybody who's new. It's actually a pretty nice blue color. see here. This is the color. And you know they've also got metallic, like sculpting and stuff. I've seen, is it Fimo? It might be Fimo that has a metallic line of polymer clays. And you don't, like, if you're making this kind of a puppet, you don't have to use this kind of clay. You can use, Sculpey and paint it if you want to. You can use Fimo. There's a million ways to do it. But it just so happens that this kind of clay here has a wide color range, and it allows you to, it never gets hard, so you can always sculpt it. It's easy to work with, easy to smooth. But if you do make a puppet that is, let's say, three-dimensional, not flat like this, and so it depends on what you want to do. But let's say, here's my tool, here it is. Let me clean this first. What was I gonna say now? Actually, let me cut this, and I need to use a razor blade too, I think, to get a curve. I'm gonna do this using my train of thought. That's what I was going to say. So if you're making a three-dimensional character and you're going to be handling parts of it, like the arms and bending the arms, sometimes animators at Wolverton Studios would use hardened, polymer baked clay on top of the armature, and they would bake the clay in parts that were not supposed to bend. So like a forearm and an upper arm, and they would add this kind of soft clay where the joints were, and that way you avoid disturbing the clay and having to re-sculpt it through your animation process. The reason they did that mainly was because Will Vinton was a clay purist, so to speak. Like, he really liked everything to be clay, and much of the artists, some of them despised him for that. They thought it was, making things, that there were solutions that were easy in terms of puppet making. So, for example, you can make a puppet using foam latex, which they did after a while, Of course, there's CG and everything. So I think a lot of artists were just like, well, if we just made these puppets out of foam rubber, then we don't have to worry about re-sculpting them, and we can be more productive, and of course time is money, and blah 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 blah. So it was more of a, there's some politics, there's business decisions in there, but it caused, it made artists adapt to the situation and come up with different ways of solving problems, just because they wanted to have a certain look to the end product. Alright, so we got some pants, and this will definitely work. It's going to make sure it's kind of tucked in around his belly there. So I'm looking at this. I think I want to make his belly a bit larger to overlap his pants, just to make the dimensions look normal. So Penn says, what clay do you recommend for mold making again? Well, it depends. Like, if you use a clay like this, which is pretty soft, this is Van Aken. So one of the kind of clays that you can use is wed clay, WED clay, which is water-based. And since water and oil don't mix, this is oil-based, and then you use water-based. When you put the water-based clay around it, when you have to remove your mold half, the first like your, let's say for example here, let me get a pencil. So you make like a mold box around something like this. And you fill all this halfway with your clay, and you add, let's say, a key here, you add a key over here, maybe a round key or something like that. This would be your first half of the mold, right? So you use your water-based clay and you get right up against the middle part of your object. So obviously you wouldn't need to do that with this because it's very flat. But if it were something, you know, shaped like this is what I'm talking about, something with some height. So you go halfway up, make sure you do it where there's no undercuts, and then pour your silicone on top. You build your wall out of foam board like this, poster board, which is really cheap. And then when you remove that, you know, you put your mold release and everything, but you can remove that water-based clay by using water to actually clean where the clay touched the oil-based clay, and you won't really disturb the oil-based clay by doing that. So that's one way to do it. You know, there's a lot of other ways to do it, but you just want to make sure that you don't use the same clay to make the mold of your object that is made of clay. So you don't want to use the same clay as this to make you know, your mold wall and all that kind of stuff, if that makes sense, because the two will stick. Like this stuff here, you just press it onto there and, you know, it's stuck. And then when it comes time to remove it, it leaves a texture, it kind of melts together with the oils in there. So these parts, like if you were to, like when I first stick it on here like this, it's barely stuck on there. But if I leave this for about a week and I try to pull this off, it'll be fused. So it's a chemical reaction. You know, the two parts just kind of bond. So you want to try to think ahead, you know, well, how can I add clay around that and then peel it off without disturbing it? And so you want to always use a softer clay to do that. Softer, softer, softer. You see here. Oh wow, time's going pretty quick. So I think I'll make this guy's belly, and then next week we'll work on making his little vest, shoes. I think next week I can probably finish the body for sure. And maybe work on another head or two. So we're going to give him this little pot belly first. Yeah, see, that'll look a lot better if I have, so I'm going to have lighting from the top down on this. Let me show you guys a close-up. So obviously I haven't smoothed it yet, but you can see here's the pot belly, and then there's the pants where they're going to start. And when I have the light from the top down, it's going to make this seem a little bit more like it's sticking up higher. Try and smooth it a bit. So yeah, I don't know. So you're thinking of making some custom dice, Janet? That's cool. The kind of clay you want to use for that would probably be like super sculpty or something that you can bake hard. You know, you can sculpt it and then bake it, and it will last a long time. my my nephews are into Dungeons and Dragons right now. Their father, showed them how you can play that, and because I have a 3D printer, they're always asking me to make stuff. And they haven't asked me to make dice yet, but I think that's probably on their list. They asked me to make little tables and little things that they can use to, make their little play environments kind of fun. And they're going to paint everything, because when you 3D print it, it's in one color, so they're going to paint it, and it's kind of neat. My nephews are creative, and my son is creative, so it's kind of cool to have, other people that are creative around. Because I can teach them stuff and make things for them, and kind of gives me something to do. Not that I really need more to do, but it's kind of weird when you become an uncle that you get all kinds of weird requests. I can tell you guys a funny story. So my nephew, his name is Patrick, he had this car racing contest he had to enter in his class, and I don't know what grade I think he's in, like maybe 5th grade or something like that. And the school gave him like a wedged piece of wood, and the wedged piece of wood had a hole drilled in the back part of it, about maybe an inch around or so. It was just a 2x2 piece of wood, and the hole was in there, and he was given the task of drilling some more holes in it for the wheel rods that go through it. So there's like 2 holes. They put 2 rods through, and they sort of sandwich these wheels, sort of like this, right? So maybe you call that an axle, I suppose, right? So I had to drill holes for him using my drill press, and gave all these exacting specifications as to how far the hole has to be back and up and everything else. So I did it, and I helped him out, and my brother-in-law came over, and we all worked this all out, and we used my calipers for these guys here, so we're like measuring it out to be really super precise, and then we put the holes in there, and then we tested it and tried to make sure that the spindles would spin nice and freely. So we did everything they required, and he was disqualified because the hole that the school actually put in the back part of the wood was too small. And I'm like, well, how is that fair? You were disqualified, but it wasn't your fault, So it was kind of a funny experience. But it was fun. I got to hang out with them for a bit, and I felt like I was doing something, something good. But anyways, I'm probably boring you guys with my crazy stories, but it is almost 9 o'clock, and so that is the conclusion of our show. And so Janet, yeah, that's pretty cool. If you're making a Disney RPG, that would be fun. Yeah, I mean, if you ever do that, maybe, I don't know if you have the ability to post pictures and stuff, but I'd love to see. So anyways, thanks everybody for stopping by this week. We will be back next week, the same time, same place, working on our character, getting some more done. And so our mold is definitely getting set up, I'm sure by now. You can see the air bubbles in the top surface. And alright, so anyways, catch you guys all later.